So welcome again to Confident Presentations. You are in the right place if communication stresses you out. And if it does, put stress in the chat. You're in the right place if you're an introvert and you're racked with anxiety every time your boss asks you to present. Put introvert in the chat if that's you. You're in the right place if you feel nervous and break out in a sweat before every presentation. Put sweat in the chat. And if you're a perfectionist and your perfectionist tendencies take over when you are writing your presentations and you find yourself getting stuck redoing the same 3 slides, put perfect in the chat. And whether you relate to one or all 5, this class today is going to be so helpful. So welcome to people who are just joining. I'm so glad you're here. Today, we are going to be talking about confident presentations. And here's what to expect today. I'm going to cover 3 myths that are stealing your confidence in your presentations. I'm going to share why these myths increase your anxiety and undermine your confidence. You're going to understand what your audience experiences when you believe these myths. And I'm going to teach you my 4-step process to shift how you think about communication so that you can show up more confidently in your presentations. And for those of you who want to know more about how we can work together to increase your confidence in all of your communication at work, I'm going to share that just before the Q&A. So welcome again. I'm Madeline Schwartz, and my clients have called me a career therapist, a lifesaver, and a secret weapon. I'm a certified communication coach, and I have helped hundreds of professionals just like you overcome their fears and confidently present their work, even when they're nervous. And before I started this business, I designed window displays, retail environments, and experiential marketing events for companies like Armani Exchange, Coach, Diesel, and Luxottica. And that experience taught me how to get a message across in seconds. Before I did that, I was a book publicist where I wrote press releases and placed authors and books in major media. So I've been telling stories my entire career. I just wasn't always comfortable telling them out loud. I was terrified of public speaking. I constantly stumbled through presentations and felt like an imposter because I didn't know how to get my ideas across. And getting over that fear was the single most liberating experience of my adult life. It changed my career, it drove me to start a business, it changed my ability to communicate my ideas and to lead, and it changed how I see myself in every area of life. And today I'm going to teach you one of the tools I use to get over that fear, and one of the tools that I teach all of my clients. It's called the communication triad. And it's something that really focuses what you need to do when you think of communication, because it can be so overwhelming. So the communication triad stands for message, mindset, and delivery. I think of this as the holy trinity of communication. And what you need to do when you want to improve your presentation skills is get clear on your message, learn to tell stories that capture attention, and shift how you think about communication and how you think about yourself as a communicator. And the way this fits into the larger process that I teach my clients when we work together over 4 months is they learn the communication triad. They learn the comms framework to calm their nerves and connect with people, and they learn how to experiment and evaluate. But today, we're going to focus on the communication triad, and specifically the part that most people miss, which is mindset. And we're going to talk about mindset today because the quickest way to increase your confidence is to change how you think about communication and how you think about yourself. But first, you have to stop believing the 3 myths that are holding you back in presentations. And so we're going to talk about those myths in just a moment. But first, I want to just give people a chance in the chat to share one thing that you are really hoping to solve or learn today in our time together. Okay, great. So let's jump in. More calmer and confident during presentations. Fantastic. You are in the right place, Susan. What else do people want to learn or solve today? Can share it in the chat. All right, so let's talk about the 3 myths that are stealing your confidence in presentation. The things that you're thinking now that aren't helping. Myth number 1 is that you've got to get it perfect. This shows up as using all of your time to perfect your slides and running out of time to practice. And you can say me in the chat or use emojis on Zoom if that sounds like you. This might also look like writing and rewriting the same 3 bullet points on your slides for hours. This can look like beating yourself up for every teeny tiny mistake. And it can be hypercritical and hard on yourself. And if you relate to this, put critic in the chat. Yeah, I see people saying I do that. Yep, exactly. A lot of critics and perfectionists in the room. And I know because I can personally relate. So because you're striving for an unattainable goal to get things perfect, you always feel insufficient. You show up tense and stiff in front of your audience, and that makes it hard to connect. And the result of believing this myth that you have to get it perfect is that you are not having fun in your presentations, and neither is your audience. So this does not create a good experience. Myth number 2 is that introverts aren't good speakers. This comes in a few different flavors, and it might sound like I have to be more extroverted to capture attention. Extroverts are naturally better presenters. And this is pervasive in our culture. It's no wonder that you don't like presentations if you think you need to be more extroverted, because pretending is exhausting. It feels inauthentic and it feels fake. So if you can relate to this, put fake in the chat or give me a me. This myth might also sound like I'm always going to be bad at this. I'm never going to be as confident as my boss or colleague or fill in the blank. And when you think this, you're always starting at a disadvantage. And it feels really discouraging because personality isn't something you can change. And from this place, you show up timid, you show up embarrassed, you feel discouraged and avoid presentations. And the result is that you appear underconfident in front of your audience, and that's mirrored by your audience not having confidence in you. So again, probably not what you're aiming for with presentations. So far, we covered myth number 1, that you've got to get it perfect. Myth number 2, that introverts aren't good speakers. And myth number 3 is that nerves go away. And when you think you need to eliminate nerves, you spend a lot of time solving for the wrong thing. You think that nervousness or anxiety is a character flaw and that you're doing something wrong every time you feel nervous. You're hard on yourself because you believe you should be past this already. I was just talking to someone last week who was expressing this very frustration because she's been leading the same meeting for the last year and a half, and she feels like, God, I should be over this already. How am I still getting nervous? So if you relate to that, put nervous in the chat. And here's the thing with myth 3. Being hard on yourself doesn't help. It's adding shame on top of already being scared. And that's a terrible combination. You get super consumed and caught up with all of the nervous sensations. And those might be shaking hands, that might be your voice trembling, and it's all you can focus on. For some people, it's filler words. And when you put all of your attention on those things, what it does is it just amplifies your nervousness. You look like a deer in the headlights when you're giving a presentation, and it makes it awkward and uncomfortable for your audience because they just feel bad for you. And you tend to rush because it's uncomfortable, and the audience tunes you out. And none of these things create the experience you want. So where you want to be is trusting that you can get your point across, even when you don't get it perfect. You want to feel confident in your communication as an introvert, not in spite of it. And you want to be able to talk about your work and influence other people without this paralyzing amount of anxiety. And the reason that you're getting stuck in these myths is you're spending your time solving the wrong thing. You're trying to ignore your nerves or make them go away. Hello, YouTube and stress eating. Raise your hand if you've ever done either of those things. Putting pressure on yourself to get things perfect, and it's not creating a safe space to learn. Trying to adopt a personality that isn't you, which is so incredibly draining. And imagining worst case scenarios and reliving past presentation mistakes. And what all of this creates is not making progress because you're avoiding opportunities, you're constantly feeling discouraged because you don't see improvement and you think that nothing is working, and tripping out your nervous system chasing after this impossible goal, which just increases anxiety, which leads to procrastination, and then more anxiety. So you can see the cycle that this puts you in. So who has ever been spinning in this cycle of procrastination and perfectionism? Let us know in the chat or with a thumbs up on Zoom. I had one client who was routinely pulling all-nighters before her work presentations. She just got so nervous about speaking in public and had a lot of difficulty organizing her content. And so she'd stay up all night. And of course, if you haven't gotten any sleep, that does not make you feel calm and confident when you have to present in front of your colleagues or senior leaders. And so it was this vicious cycle. And when we started working together and she used my 7-step process to put together presentations in bite-sized chunks, it completely changed how she went about it so that she stopped pulling all-nighters. It stopped being this event that would take over her entire work week. And she was able to communicate her ideas in the time allotted, like get through the entire agenda in the meeting time and with very few follow-up questions. And she said the first time she used it, it was the best presentation that she had ever given. So those are some of the ways that our thinking influences how we show up in our presentations and how it can really impact our confidence when we are trying to get our ideas across. And now that we know what these myths create, let's talk about how to spend your precious time instead if you want to up-level your mindset around communication. I'm just going to take a sip of water before we dig into mindset. So now that we know what these myths create, we're going to talk about how to shift your thinking and feel differently in your presentations in order to show up more confidently. So this is the same process that I teach all of my clients to really change their perspective and their attitude around mindset. And for anyone who is wondering how mindset can have such a big impact, I like to think of mindset sort of like moving the furniture. So if you've ever rearranged your furniture in your living room, you can have all of the same pieces, but if you move the placement of the couch, suddenly the whole room looks different. And it's the same for the thoughts in your head. So the soundtrack that you're playing now, which might be blaring, "You're no good at this. You're always going to feel nervous. You look like an idiot." You can change that by moving those thoughts, just like you would move the couch in the living room. So the mindset process is number one, to identify the thoughts holding you back. You want to write them all down on paper so that you can see them. And I know from experience, a lot of people don't want to do this because those thoughts might be really negative and they don't want to see them. And so something we do in coaching is to really work through that resistance, because the first step to solving a problem is to admit that you have a problem. So once you've done that, step number two is to decide what you want to think on purpose. This shifts the inner soundtrack from blaring those negative things on repeat, like nothing is ever going to change, to something kinder, more compassionate, and supportive. So right now, if you have pen and paper, I want you to take a moment and just write down what you might want to think in purpose instead of the self-sabotaging thoughts, such as, "I need to get this perfect." After you've done that, step number three is to find evidence of where those thoughts are already true. So look for places in your life where you feel more confident. And then what you want to do is borrow what you think there and how you feel there and apply it to communication. And this is something that takes practice, that I work on consistently with all of my clients. And the next step, step four, really helps reinforce this, which is to experiment and evaluate. And experimenting and evaluating is the alternative cycle to procrastinating and perfecting. And what this does is it gives you permission to be human. It releases all of that pressure you're putting on yourself to get things perfect. It's kind of like turning the valve on a pressure cooker and just letting the steam off. It gives you ways to feel the negative emotions and forgive yourself for mistakes instead of endlessly ruminating. It allows you, when you evaluate, to hone in on what's working and what's not, so that you can see your own progress. And that creates motivation to take more action. And it makes your practice time way more efficient because you know how to spend your time. You can see what's working and what's improving from one presentation to the next. And so you'll need less and less preparation time with every presentation. So the reason this works is that you stop being so critical. You change that inner soundtrack. I like to think of it as the Muppets in your head. And when you change that inner soundtrack, you're not afraid to take action. It's just less scary to take chances and say things even when you're not 100% sure. So you feel more relaxed in your presentations. This creates a lot more opportunities to practice and build momentum. You stop focusing on things that aren't helping, such as filler words, slides, gestures, and vocal tone. Those are all good things to think about after you've mastered the basics. You're going to feel less nervous when you apply this mindset process. You're going to spend less time in your fight or flight stress response, and it's going to give you more access to creativity and logical thinking. And that's going to allow your communication to be a lot more impactful. And instead of throwing time and resources at the wrong problem, you're going to spend your energy practicing the right things. So if you think about this idea of a triangle, and there's message, and there's mindset, and there's delivery, I want you to just jot down on your paper how much of your time are you spending on each of those three things. And if you changed how you allotted that time, what do you think would happen? If you devoted just a little bit more time, let's say 10% more time to your mindset and cleaning up all of those negative thoughts in your brain. When you do this, you're going to stop dreading giving presentations. You're going to stop rushing through presentations. You're going to spend less time ruminating afterwards. You're going to spend less time rambling when you get nervous and someone asks you a question. You're going to come across more clearly and concisely. And that's going to help you motivate and influence other people. And the result is your presentations will be more engaging, and it's going to build trust and consensus. So what people think they need to get to perfect their presentations on paper, or what you think you need to be more confident, is to perfect your presentations on paper or the screen. But what you actually need is permission to experiment, the ability to calm yourself down, a clear message, stories that capture attention, and the emotional resiliency to forgive yourself if you fail, and to be able to think on your feet when things don't go quite the way you expect. So to recap, the next time you're stuck in your head, I want you to follow these 4 steps. Identify the thoughts holding you back. Decide what you want to think on purpose. Look for areas in your life where you already feel confident, and then experiment in the moment and evaluate how it goes. And that's going to help you feel more confident, connect better with your audience, and create presentations that are more engaging. So that's what I wanted to teach you today. And I am so excited for you to take what you learned into your next presentation. And I also know that for many of you, there might be more than 3 myths standing between you and the confidence you seek in presentations. For many people, you have this deep-seated fear around public speaking and presenting your ideas at work, and that's something I can help with in coaching. And developing a clear message and changing how you think about communication unlocks so much power and confidence. If that's something you want help with, I invite you to spend an hour with me on a discovery call where you can share your roadblocks and fears that are getting in the way of confident communication at work. And we'll talk through exactly what you need to overcome your challenges. We'll map out the skills and the mindset you need to develop your confidence in communicating at work. You're going to leave this call feeling so relieved, knowing that there's a really simple solution and I can help you develop the skills you want by early next year. So for anyone who wants help with that, I'm going to put a link into the chat where you can book a free discovery call. And the amazing thing about communication is that you can never invest too much in your skills. You can never improve too much. It's the skill that affects every area of life: work, relationships, your personal life, personal activities. And so developing this skill pays dividends for the rest of your career. One of my clients came to me because she wanted help developing her presentation skills and building her professional presence at a new job. And when she started, she was so stuck in getting things perfect. She was working until midnight, just putting in all of these extra hours. And none of it was helping because it was throwing time at the wrong problem. And when we discovered what the problem really was, which was not feeling belonging in this male-dominated space, we were able to solve it, and everything changed. She felt more confident in work. She took more ownership of her projects. She started leaving on time, and she built really incredible relationships with her clients. And when she got laid off in the spring, she felt complete confidence in her ability to get a new job. And she got 3 job offers in 3 months and was able to choose where she wanted to work. So when you sign up for a free consult call, we'll spend an hour mapping out exactly what's holding you back in your communication, whether it's one of the 3 myths that we talked about today, or whether it's other mindset shifts or skills that are holding you back. And we'll talk through how to work through that fear and develop the skills and mindset to build your presence and feel more confident in your presentations. So again, you can schedule a call with the link in the chat. You'll also get an email where you can schedule a time to talk to me. And before I jump into the Q&A and take all of your questions, I just want to address a few of the reasons that you might think this sounds like what you need, be curious about coaching, but still feel hesitant to schedule a call. So for a lot of people, they're worried that it might take years to fix everything that you want to change about your communication. And if you think it's going to take a really long time, it can feel super overwhelming and it's never a good time to start. And here's what I want to share is that changing your communication does not take a lot of time. It just takes making a decision to start. I work with people for 4 months, and in that time, we build your skills, we build your mindset, we practice for presentations, and you feel completely different at the end of 4 months. And I show you how to build your skills and momentum in just 10 to 20 minutes a day. One of the other things that people worry about is that they don't trust themselves to get the results. And if that's something that you are feeling, the first thing that we would do in coaching is to look at how you make decisions. And you will learn how to trust yourself in decision-making and to speak up even when you're not sure, and to use that process of experimenting and evaluating so that you can stop ruminating on past mistakes and instead start trusting yourself to take more action. And the third thing that people sometimes worry about is the timing, whether they should do it now, or they should do it after the holidays, or they should do it after their kid's birthday, or after a big trip or a big project at work. And there's always going to be a reason to wait, but this problem of feeling underconfident in your presentations will be waiting on the other side. So if you're curious about coaching and you want to know how I can help you solve this and feel more confident in your presentation, you can book a free consult call and we'll spend an hour mapping out exactly what's holding you back. And whether or not we decide it's a good fit, you're going to leave that call feeling relieved because there's a really simple solution and you will leave with a plan. So now I want to open it up to questions. You can put your questions in the chat, or you can unmute and ask questions about communication, about presentations and the myths that I shared today, or about coaching. So I can't wait to hear your questions. And I'll just take some water while you think of them. All right, so we have a very quiet group today. Unfortunately, as an introvert, I'm comfortable with silence. So one of a question that someone was asking me last night was, I was at an event and they were talking about being a new manager. And this is just where to start as a new manager. Like if they've always been on the creative side and their primary focus has been around generating ideas, and then suddenly they're in charge of other people, that can feel really intimidating. And this woman was sharing that in her industry, there's very little training for managers. And so this is a place, like the mindset framework that I shared today can also be applied to management. And I think of some situations that often come up, especially at the end of the year, where people are having their performance reviews. Just yesterday, I was doing a session prepping a client for their performance review. And you can use this same tool, the communication triad, for difficult conversations and things like performance reviews to get clear on your message. So you want to think about what you want your audience to remember at the end. You want to think about how you're going to deliver that information strategically. So specifically in performance reviews, how to deliver it in a way that is going to make the feedback constructive, or the thing that you're asking for feel like a great move in the interest of the company. And then in order to present that in a way that is going to be most helpful and persuasive, you want to pay attention to your mindset, because performance reviews are a place that people tend to get very stressed out. I'd love to see some emojis on Zoom if that happens for you, that you get stressed out about performance reviews. And so going through this process of writing down all of the thoughts that are making you extra nervous. And then what you want to think on purpose is going to be so helpful in that situation, so that you're less focused on all of the worry thoughts and just that spinning and anxiety. And you can instead focus your attention on what you actually want to accomplish in that time. So I want to invite you to share your questions. You can unmute and share them out loud, or you can put them in the chat. Any questions that you have about coaching or mindset or communication. And if you have a specific challenge that you were hoping to solve today, let's talk about it right now. Okay, so Emily asks, I notice when I speak to new people, clients at work, versus partners we weekly engage with, I tend to get extra nervous. Do you have any tips for overcoming this? Yes. So let me just read the question again. All right, so it sounds like you are getting more nervous when you are speaking to new people versus the people that you interact with on a regular basis. And that is so normal. This same thing happens for a lot of people when they are communicating regularly with their peers, let's say, and they might feel comfortable doing that. And then they get really nervous when they have to present to C-suite leaders, for instance. And so the circumstance, the people changing, or the titles of those people can really change how we think about this particular situation or this opportunity. So using this process will be so helpful, Emily, to find the thoughts that are throwing you off. And so one thing that I would suggest is that you spend some time thinking about how these two situations are the same as opposed to different, because it's often that we think they're completely different, and that's what throws us off. And when you can find the similarities and see, oh, I already know how to do it over here, and I feel comfortable communicating in this scenario, then you can apply that same type of thinking to the other scenario. And that in the end, it's helpful to remember that in any situation, whether you're talking to a new person or someone you've known for a long time, whether you're talking to 3 people or 30 people or 300 people, at the end, you are talking to other human beings, and that's something that you know how to do. And so reframing what you're doing can be helpful. So I'll give you an example. I had a client who was giving a big presentation to a CEO, or maybe it was multiple C-suite leaders. And she was really, really nervous about it because she was focused on the titles and them being big, important people like up here and her being down here. And when she reframed the topic to, oh, I'm just having a conversation about a topic that I'm really passionate about, she felt a lot more comfortable. So hopefully that's helpful, Emily. You can put any additional questions into the chat. All right, Ansa says, my main challenge is losing the flow of my presentation and then losing the direction I wanted to be going in. I feel that I end up either repeating or missing important facts. How do you overcome that during a presentation, even after working on mindset, like you said? Yes. All right. So there is a free resource on my website that I'm going to put a link to in the chat that I think is going to be very helpful for you and for everyone when you are preparing for presentations. This is going to help you hone in on your message so that you're really clear on your main message and you're really clear on the high level points that you need to communicate no matter what. And so when you know what those are and you've mapped them out ahead of time, it's going to help you stay on track even when you do get a little nervous or flustered or you lose direction. You'll be able to go back to, oh, the main thing I wanted to communicate is this. And when you're able to do that, to say that in one sentence for you, like you have to be clear in order to make it clear to other people, then it's just much easier to stay on topic. And if you do get thrown off, it's okay. And you can just pause, take a deep breath. And this is where it's really important to calm your nerves. So you want to pause, you want to take a deep breath, give yourself a moment to collect yourself. And then you might just say, oh, sorry, I got off track, going back to what we were talking about, and then return to what you were going to say. So hopefully that was helpful, Ansa. Let me know if you have clarifying questions. All right, Paris says, I'm not a native English speaker and feel uncomfortable speaking in groups because I worry my language is incorrect. Yes, okay. That comes up a lot for people who are presenting in a second language. I've definitely had clients have this same challenge. And sometimes people think it's a problem with their vocabulary. And what I always direct them back to is that it's usually just a problem with your mindset and feeling really self-conscious about that. Maybe it takes you a little bit longer to process things because you have to translate in your head. Sometimes people are worried about their accent, and then it might be harder for their audience to understand them. And these are often, not always, but often things that can be solved with changing what you think about it. So for instance, for you, if you feel self-conscious that you might be responding too slowly, to develop more constructive thoughts about that it's fine and it's natural to pause, that while people wait for you to respond, that it just builds suspense so that they are more interested in what you say. And the other thing that can really help normalize this, Para, is to just tell people what is happening. Like, English isn't my first language. So, bear with me while I translate it in my head. And I find that people are extremely forgiving when you let them know what's going on, but it's often our own mindset blocks that keep us from sharing that with the people that we're talking to. So hopefully that's helpful. Let me know if you have any other questions about that. So who else has questions about what we talked about today? The myths that might be getting in your way, whether it is perfectionism, nerves, introversion, something else that I didn't mention. This is a great time to get your questions answered today. So I wanted to, I see another question. I find myself not being concise or repeating myself during presentations. Any tips? Yes, Susan. Okay, so I would also encourage you to grab that resource on my website, the 5-Minute Planning Guide, because it's going to help you hone in on your message And if you spend even just 2 minutes doing that ahead of time, it helps you stay focused. And then when you're focused and you know what you want to communicate, and you're in a more high pressure situation, it helps with not getting thrown off in that situation. The other thing that I would encourage you to focus on is pacing. So slowing down, being very purposeful about slowing down, taking longer pauses between your thoughts can help with two things. It can help just calm your nerves when you talk slower. And then instead of filling the space by repeating yourself, you're filling that space intentionally with a pause, and that often does the trick. And there are lots of great ways to slow down your pacing. I have lots of hands-on techniques that I share with clients when I work with them. But what I want to share with you today for everybody who might get nervous in their presentations is a really quick way to reduce nerves in the moment. And that is to count down backwards from 5. So everyone can just count down with me as I do it silently. So 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And then we're going to do it again, but this time I want you to add something sensory. So as we count, I want you to touch your thumb to your forefinger, and your next finger, and your next finger, and your next finger. So everyone do it with me. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. And what this does is it calms your nerves for 2 reasons. It taps into the 5 senses, so it uses a different part of the brain. It moves you out of your stress response and into your thinking brain. And then also, you cannot count backwards without stopping to think about it. You can count forwards automatically. Most people can do that, but you do have to stop to go backwards. And that, again, is just this very quick way to interrupt the thought loop that is making you nervous, and then pause long enough so that you can collect yourself and calm down yourself. And that should help with being more concise and repeating yourself because you feel more calm. Let me know if that helps, Susan. And if anyone wants to share how they feel after doing that exercise, put it in the chat. All right, great. So Ansa says, people have told me after a presentation that I didn't look nervous and look confident, but I know I was all nerves inside during it. I think it's the whole physical setting of the room that throws me, where I'm standing at the front of the room with everyone watching me. Can you give me any tips on body language or eye contact, where to look? Yes. But first, I want to go back to what we talked about today, which is that nerves go away, because when you normalize having nerves and that's just part of the body's way of preparing, then they can be less terrifying and you will be less thrown off by them. But as far as body language and eye contact, I'm assuming sounds like you're in a physical room. And so for eye contact, depending on how large a room it is, you want to make, if it's a small room and it's just a few people, you want to make eye contact with everyone at some point in your presentation, but you don't want to scan really fast because that makes people really nervous. So what you want to do instead is share one thought with one person or one section of the room, for instance. And after you had shared that one thought or sentence, then you would go to the next section or person and share one thing with them. And so think about making eye contact for longer than feels comfortable or natural for you. And that is going to be the right amount of time to focus on them for a whole thought. And as far as body language, you want to be grounded with both feet firmly planted on the floor, and think about standing in a more upright, open posture, because that gives you more confidence and more ability to project your voice. Okay, so who else has a question, either about coaching or communication, something that we talked about today? And for anyone who has questions that maybe you don't feel comfortable asking in front of other people, definitely grab that link to sign up for a consult call so we can talk privately. You'll definitely have an email in your inbox by the time we get off this class where you can schedule a time to talk to me, and grab the free resource on my website, which it walks you through 4 steps to hone in on your message and be clear on your talking points. And it's also going to help you if you get nervous answering questions in a presentation. It'll help you with that. All right, Koss has a question. I feel I start to speak too fast when I'm anxious, and pausing feels difficult. Any suggestions? Yes. I'd be curious whether you found this exercise helpful in just lowering your anxiety a little bit. And that is something, I did it up here so that everyone can see it, but this is something that you can be doing with one hand, down under the table if you're sitting at a table, or presenting on Zoom. Even if you're standing up, you could do it really subtly just with your hand, down by your leg. And so I would try something like that, something sensory to calm your nerves, because again, like tuning into your senses uses a different part of the brain and is very calming. And when you have a sensory component, it can break up the thoughts that are making you so nervous, and then that might remind you to pause. Giving a lecture, it could look awkward. Yeah, agreed. That might not be the thing to do if you're giving a lecture, unless you're standing at a podium, and then you can just do it behind the podium. The other thing that you can do is get this same effect by just rubbing your fingertips against your pants, let's say, and really focusing on what the fingertips feel like against the fabric, and that can have the same effect. And when I work with clients one-on-one, we really figure out the techniques for you that are going to help, so that when you're in situations, giving a lecture or running a meeting, you have the tools that you have experimented with, that work for you. And so you know exactly what to do to ground yourself in your body. You know what you need to think to feel more calm, and you have a really clear message because you have used my process to hone in on what you want to say. And those things together make you feel so much more confident and increase your presence in front of a crowd when you are giving presentations. Okay, so we are coming to the top of the hour, and I would love for people to put in the chat one thing that you are taking away from this class today. And then if anyone has an additional question, I'm happy to stay on a few extra minutes and take questions. But before people have to hop off, please share what it is, what's your biggest takeaway from today? Plan, slow down, pause, 5 fingers. Excellent. Yes. And I would love to hear, Susan, how it goes when you use that and if it helps with the pacing. What else are you taking away from today? Reframing my mindset. Oh, thank you. I'm so glad that you came today and that you found this helpful. All right, the mindset, methods and delivery triangle, plus 5 fingers. Excellent. Yes. Ansa says, I love your pointers. I'm working on my mindset before the presentation and just rearranging the furniture in your head. It makes the biggest difference. It changes your whole perspective. And when you start with the mindset first, or even just include mindset in your preparation, it makes the rest of it easier. It makes it easier to hone in on your message. It makes it easier to be clear. It makes it easier for you to go slowly and not rush. It makes it easier to not get thrown off by questions, and all because you are changing your thinking. And then all of the other tools that I use with my clients to hone in on their message and make conversations easier, all of those work better when you combine it with mindset. Fantastic takeaways. I'm just going to put in the chat again the link for anyone who wants to book a call with me so we can talk about how I can help you build your skills. And I'm so glad that you came to this class today. Again, if anyone has another question that they didn't get to ask yet, I'm happy to stay on for a few more minutes. All right, everyone. I'm so glad you joined me today, and I can't wait for you to give more confident presentations. Bye, everyone.